Dudes? It's your boy Agent Psycho, aka Sniper98. Welcome back to another how-to. These have been in short supply as of late, so here's another twofer along with Gil. In case you missed Arrogant Fuckboy's video, it should be the last one before this, assuming I'm not lazy as fuck over the weekend and actually get to edit 2 videos in a single day. My own procrastination aside, let's take a look at everyone's favorite chocolate altar, Okita altar. And don't you lie to me, I know exactly where you looked when you saw Okita altar's design for the first time. See guys, this is how Takeuchi gets you. It makes you forget the fact that he's been making a living drawing nothing but saber faces for the past 2 decades. Kit Kat altar is a DPS alter ego, as alter egos tend to be in FGO. Specifically in her case, she's primarily a farming alter ego with skills that make her very compatible with more traditional farming setups that involve waiver, merling, or starting charge CEs. I say, quote, more traditional farming setups because right now NA's just barely entered the age of Scotty, which will last for a whole 2 years before someone else replaces her down the line, but we'll cross that bridge when it's time. Moon Rune language lesson number 1. Okita's name can mean to wake up, so Okita altar is always falling asleep in her idle and skill animations. Hershey's has a truly sweet attack rating that befits her role as a DPS or farming alter ego at 12.4k. The fact that her HP is at an abysmal 12.7k is irrelevant given the fact that you'll mostly be using her for farming setups, if at all, unless your name is Musaki or you simp Okita altar really hard. Not that there's anything wrong with that, just look at how many fucking Hololive references I dropped in my how to use every SSR 2020 video. The rest of her stats don't really matter given that again she's meant to be a farming servant first and foremost, but for what it's worth, she does have high hit counts on her face cards, and with a Lancer deck, she's quite nice at Star Gen. The real meat of Snickers' thighs, her utility, comes from her skills, as is the case with most servants in the game, and I just want an excuse to talk about her Thunder thighs at least once in this video. Her S1 is a dual 30% color buff for both her Buster and Quick cards, and lasts for 3 turns. This is her, quote, mana burst skill, and in the context of farming, you should really only be using the Buster part of it, but in case you need to fall back on face card farming, the quick buff is nice to have too. More importantly though, it's for 3 turns, so if you can get her to double NP, this skill will stay active both times, or at least it should, unlike your more traditional mana burst type skills. Her S2 gives her 30% charge, a 1-turn 500% star weight buff, and an additional 20% attack buff as of the strengthening she got with the Gouda 4 rerun. If you've come here just after watching Gil's video, then you should know what I'm about to say about Choco Altar's own 30%. It makes her very useful for Waiver Merlin setups, and makes her very compatible with starting charge CEs, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video. The star weight buff is like the quick buff in her first skill. Ideally, you shouldn't even need it, but in the case of face card farming, again, it can come in handy to get through a wave more efficiently, especially since Okita Altar can generate a few stars on her own and then collect them for herself, assuming she hasn't already used the skill for another setup. One more thing to know about the star weight buff. Even at max level, because 3 Musketeers is an alter ego who as a class only have average star weights, if there aren't enough stars to go around, or if you got other servants with higher default star weights, it might be a bit tough for her to secure stars for herself, even with her S2 active. Usually this isn't a big enough deal to worry about, but just keep in mind that she's no Gilgamesh with his own S3. Speaking of third skills, her own S3 is a 30% MP damage buff and a 1-hit evade that lasts for 3 turns. Basically the same evade skill that your level 2 Arctic Mystic Code has. This skill partially solves the problem that I have with skills that other servants have, where they have both their damage buff and their hard defense effect together in one skill, because in that case, you oftentimes have to choose between using those skills for one or the other effect, but not both, as would be ideal. In Crunchbar's case, her evade lasts for 3 turns, so she can afford to be more flexible with her usage of her S3, though at the end of the day, it's still only 1 hit, so in case she gets hit before an enemy uses their MP, yeah, she's kinda fucked. Not that this should happen all that much though, when she's supposed to be just a farmer, but I guess you never know, it's still an evade at the end of the day. Her passives give her 17.5% magic resist and a small 10% crit damage buff, which again, like in Gil's case, is nice to have since Okita Altar may have her own star weight buff but no dedicated crit buff skill. Now that she's gotten her S2 buffed, Twix is now one of the only servants in the game, if not the only one, who has access to all 3 buff types in the game. Her S1 is her color buff, her S2 is her attack buff, and her S3 is her power mod, or more specifically, her MP damage buff. This means that her own damage potential is immense just from her skills alone, without the help of other servants giving her buffs on top of them, so you can imagine how crazy it can get once you do start buff stacking her. Naturally, this factors in very nicely with her NP, which is a Buster AoE that also inflicts a 30 to 50% Buster resist debuff on everyone for 3 turns to allow Okita alters or anyone else's follow-up Buster cards to deal even more damage in case the NP itself doesn't manage to kill everyone on its own. This is where her use as a farmer really shines. She has strong self buffs, a Buster AoE MP, and alter ego advantage, meaning that she can farm multiple classes easily, either separately or even at the same time, and this is even before she gets her S2 buff, since typically you'll be giving her supports that have their own attack buffs of some kind anyway. Her potential as a farmer is so great, in fact, that for a very brief period of time, JP considered her the best farming assassin in the game. It's a bit of a joke that those of you who watched my stream back when Okita Alter was about to be released for NA may have heard me make, and that's because assassins as a class in FGO suck at farming because the Lightworks fucking hates them for some reason. Assassins have to deal with a 0.9x class damage mod, meaning that they're always doing on average 10% less damage than they should. This doesn't sound like much at first, but when you start buff stacking and your servants start doing hundreds of thousands or even millions of damage, even just a 10% penalty can shave off tens of thousands of damage that you might need for a clean wipe on a wave somewhere. They also don't have a lot of servants with charge skills, and the ones who do are often not ideal for AoE farming. Semiramis might be an AoE Buster assassin with 30% charge of her own, but not only does her Buster resist down on her S3 eat stars, but her damage in general is fucking potato. So the joke is that because Butterfingers' damage output can be so high, she was for a time considered the best farming assassin because she did their job better than they did. As a matter of fact, when it came to farming at least, there was a point in time in FGO's history where Okita Alter was actually put in S tier on all those tier list memes that y'all love gluing your eyes to, especially nowadays that Castoria is shaking them all down at the moment. So with all this power, with all her potential for farming, Okita Alter was in a prime position to take the JP farming meta at the time of her release by storm. Not only that, but she was an alter design of an already pretty popular character, and she was extremely well received at the time of her debut, especially with her involvement in her event's story. She had everything going for her coming out of her debut event in Gouda 3. What could go wrong?
OHEY.
As you all know, Scotty's doctrine demands quick servants, and with her release just a month or two after Okita Alter's own release, she brought with her the infamous quick farming meta that I'm sure all of you guys know about by this point. The servant Okita Alter was based on was already quick, and just like that moon rune lesson I taught you all at the beginning of this video, Okita Alter couldn't also be a quick servant because of that. And so even before Okita Alter's true potential as like the next big farming servant could be realized, she got cast aside in favor of someone who could turn more servants into the next big farming servants. Considering her story back in Gouda 3, what happened to her in the FGO meta hits way too close to home, don't you think? But then again, none of this shit really matters if you're one of those people who managed to roll Okita Alter but not Scotty for some reason, and that's what we're gonna assume for the sake of this video, because obviously it'd be too much to ask out of free-to-plays for y'all to have more than one SSR on your account, right? Obviously, in case you didn't get the memo by this point in the video, you use Milky Way primarily for farming. Get her a 50% starting charge CE or something, give her Merlin or Waver or even both, go find a node that's got cavalry class or berserker enemies, and go to town. Especially noteworthy is her ability to make your soap farming much easier in Lost Belt 2, which is a bit ironic in case you're trying to farm soaps for Scotty. An MP5 Choco Alter can one-shot the third wave at the Castle Ice and Snow node with the Arjuna Valentine CE and a Merlin. While most of you don't have an MP5 of course, even at lower MP levels, Okita Alter should at least soften up that last Valkyrie enough to make finishing her off much easier. That, and it's not like y'all have MP5 SSR AoE Assassins or MP5 Raiko or something to do this job either. Speaking of assassins actually, this note should illustrate why Okita Alter had her initial hype of being the best farming assassin in the game back when that was relevant. Other than farming, if you simp for her hard enough, you can try using Baby Ruth as a DPS. Ideally, she's best used in fights where there are mixed cavalry class enemies so that she's good against all of them, but her game plan is to generate stars for herself, crit everything, use her MP to clear a wave, and kill whatever's left with her buffed face cards. Since most of her kit is made of damage buffs for herself, with the only hard defense effect being her one-hit evade, you need to give her supports who can work overtime, keeping Toblerone topped off, as if Waver and Merlin don't already work overtime without you asking. Speaking of teammates, Choco doesn't strictly need damage buffs from her supports simply because she's got enough of her own, especially when she gets her S2 buff later on, so you can actually afford to take more unconventional supports that cover for whatever she's missing, like heals, debuff cleanses, and other forms of defensive utility. Not that most of you really care about all this, since you'll all stick to your usual Merlin waivers anyway. Just remember that alter egos do not have true class advantage, as in they only do 50% extra damage to cavalry classes, not the full 100% extra damage that most other classes have, unless they're beating up Zerks, of course. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that Reese's is doing double damage since the game gives you the same big red numbers, but whenever her buffs are on cooldown, she just won't be doing as much damage as true counterclassers. As for CEs, Okita Alter has so many buffs on her own, so she'll take a wide variety of them. Golden Sumo is a natural fit on her because before her S2 buff, it's the only buff type that she's missing, but it's not even that needed because typically the supports you'll be giving her have attack buffs of their own. So anything that has some kind of buster buff or crit damage buff can fly here. Starweight buffs these too even, if you want her to take a more dedicated crit DPS role. You could even give her a Stargen CE too, since she's not half bad at it, even if it's less than ideal on her, because she's supposed to be a DPS and not necessarily a Stargen, but in case you get bored of using Jack all the time, you could perhaps switch it up like this. Her own Bond CE increases the party's buster and quick performance by 10%, which again is nice but suboptimal since she's not meant to be a support. So in summary, Payday's job is to do damage, rob banks, and farm Valkyries, or just about anything that's a cavalry class or berserker. Even if she's an alter, Choco Alter's gameplay is actually fairly the same as the regular Okitas, where they just focus on killing shit, generating stars along the way, and killing shit even harder. It's unfortunate that Okita Alter had to lose the Scotty lottery by not being a quick servant, but that won't stop those of you who have her from using her when you don't have a Scotty, just like how people in JP right now won't stop using Scotty if they have her and not Castoria. Actually, on second thought, maybe they will, since JP support lists are nothing but Castoria on their castle slots by now, unless they moved all their Scotties over to the all slot or something. And that's all you need to know about FGO's sweetest candy bar, cause Okita Alter sometimes be out here looking like a snack, especially around Pixiv, Twitter, and Sad Panda. And remember to hydrate with a glass of water, since we're all thirsty as fuck. Make sure to watch the previous video on Gilgamesh in case you somehow didn't see that one yet. If you've enjoyed the memes, consider dropping a sub on the channel. I also stream FGO and other gacha games over on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/ToaSniper98, so I'd appreciate it if you could drop a follow over there as well, or if you stop by just to hang out whenever I'm live. Next video is going to be on Chloe, and yes, those are sirens you're hearing in the background, but they ain't for me, bitches! Thanks for watching, and until next time, deuces.